It's the Houston School ISD $4.4 billion bond program. That is corruption in plain sight.
What we're looking at here is a criminal conspiracy to defraud the public. It's the public's money, it's the pension holders' money, and they're all screwed in this case. There's no way out.
Breaking news as another whistleblower has come forward to shed light on the massive corruption and fraud behind the scenes between the appraisal district and the school districts. And what has happened, guys, is they have gambled the pension funds of these teachers and have lost. The teachers in many school districts, in fact, many school districts right now are insolvent without an ability to repay these pensions. And so today I have Jeff Mashburn, first of all, an absolutely appropriate last name, Jeff. I also have Mitch Vexler here with us today. And, you know, essentially, guys, if this isn't Chevron doctrine and government overreach at its worst, I really don't know what is. And so just to the viewers real quick, Jeff, I've tried to condense 18 years of Jeff's work into a tiny little pinpoint of an iceberg. And so we're going to do the best we can to kind of pinpoint these things. Now, first of all, you know, Jeff, thank you for coming forward, brother. I appreciate the courage. How are you? And have you signed the Mitch Vexler petition?
Well, thanks, Travis, for having me and Mitch on this video and this channel to share what I know about this issue. I'm doing great. Actually, I am ecstatic after I've learned about what y'all have been involved with and what Mitch has been involved with. Y'all been a breath of fresh air to me, a huge shot of adrenaline to keep fighting the fight.
And the petition, Jeff?
The petition's been signed, and I am passing and spreading the word to everybody I know as fast as I can.
Very good.
Sign that petition because I know how important that is for Mitch's cause, and we definitely want to help him out as much as we can.
And, you know, just for the viewers as well, I brought Mitch Vexler here to hopefully better articulate some of the problems here. So thank you for joining us as well, Mitch. Now, what I've done, Jeff, again, and for the viewers, I'm going to try to condense the issue here. And then I want to categorize this, Jeff, into three different categories, which is falsifying contracts potentially. And again, this has to be prosecuted. We're reviewing information. We're taking a look at math. We're asking tough questions, but I've broken this into falsified contracts. Number two, the risk involved for homeowners and teacher and pension holders. And number three, what looks like and appears to be a cover-up, possibly money laundering, possibly, you know, racketeering. So those are the three subjects, but let me kind of set you up, Jeff, and I want you to take it away, brother. Essentially, Jeff has come forward to highlight a small but major issue. I say small because the bed of lies and the web of deceit are completely out of control. The system is completely broken. And we're going to talk today about something called Chapter 313 agreements, which is basically an agreement between the state and school districts and solar companies. So we're going to talk about how the solar companies and the school districts have recently negotiated roughly, this is rough math, $964 million contract between these solar companies and an ISD, essentially in the Hill Country. And, you know, the promises of the school districts agreeing to these contracts is the idea that by them signing up for these contracts, that new businesses would be created, that jobs would be created, and that services would be created. But what is really happening here is these solar companies and corporations appear to be predators looking for foolish school districts to sign these agreements, which is really the school districts gambling with the pension money. They've lost that bet. These agreements are not making any money. They're completely insolvent. They're going bankrupt. And I really want to explain to the viewers, Jeff. I want to summarize this. Like, how is this possible? How in jeopardy? How insolvent are these school districts? How bankrupt are these teachers? You know, the risk here. But before I kind of jump into that, Jeff, you know, why is this important to you? Why is this whole corruption, fraud situation so important to you? What is your motivation here?
Well, I'm a father, a husband, have 4 children, I have grandchildren. Their futures are on the line. They're impacted on them ever being able to own a home and be free of, government oppression, taxation without representation, fraud, corruption. I mean, their wealth is being stolen right out in front from them. I've been fighting this a long time, as you're aware, and not willing to give up or back down until it's stopped. But basically, it's for the future of my kids and everybody. I mean, in Texas and home and property owners who aren't aware and not paying attention to how the system's rigged and works against them, and even institutions they have high regard for, like school districts, who everybody believe, don't do anything wrong in a lot of people's opinion. They're some of the most corrupt entities going on, in the state of Texas.
I'm starting to learn that, Mitch Vexler, who's with us, has really opened my eyes, to that corruption. And so let's talk about these contracts. Let's talk about these 313 agreements. It's a massive contract, huge risk for the pension holders of school districts, huge liabilities. So let's go over the contracts, first of all, the 313 agreements. And the first thing is explain, Jeff, if you can, and I'm going to try to box you in. Please, work with me. I know this is 18 years of your heart and your soul, brother. So I know this is so hard, but just keep it simple for the viewers. A lot of money at stake here. This is future tax. Obviously, this is a horrible thing, and this is a tax ad valorem, right? So this is a future tax on future value. Is that right? And I want you to summarize real quick. Bring us to the point where the school district negotiates with these solar companies. Let's talk about that negotiation. Let's talk about those contracts. How are those contracts negotiated? And is there any due diligence involved?
Well, first of all, the contracts between school districts and solar farm companies and their lawyers and their legal representation is done behind closed door sessions. Taxpayers have no input, no voice into what is going on. They're not transparent as they claim that they are in Texas, and the TEA has a scoring system of how transparent their districts are. It's false. It's lies. They're not transparent. It's all done behind closed doors, and school districts are using lawyers hired by the solar farm companies to represent the taxpayer, which is absolutely absurd. We have no legal representation on our side of the fence to represent us to get the best.
Jeff, and I want to get there. That to me, that's more of a cover up, money laundering. I want to get there, but I want to first, let's just start at the beginning.
Okay.
And again, I know you got 18 years into the future on this stuff, but let's start at step one, the negotiation of the contracts. Okay. So you got this big, massive solar company coming in, being a predator, basically looking for a school that doesn't understand how to budget. And I want you to explain to the viewers the due diligence involved on the front end, how there's no true cost of construction done. There's no requirement of due diligence. They close the deal. There's no due diligence done in the background to make sure that this was a good idea for the taxpayer. Are they qualified? How are they negotiating?
So the solar farm companies apply for an application with the state comptroller's office. And part of the application process is they tell the state that they're building a solar farm worth X amount of dollars, and it's got X amount of generating capacity. And that's application submitted to the state comptroller's office. And basically it's rubber stamped. Nobody's verifying the true cost of the solar farm, what it actually cost, or the generating capacity. And we've already found numerous issues with falsification in contracts. The state comptroller's not doing that. They're not doing their due diligence. And once the application is accepted and there's a check written by the solar farm company to the school districts for $75,000, that application is moved forward through the pipeline. And then once that agreement's been approved by the state comptroller office, the local county governments, commissioner courts in Hill County, develop what is known as reinvestment zones. And reinvestment zones are areas where these solar farms are being built, and landowners are leasing their land to solar farm companies to build these solar farms on their properties. The solar farms the idea behind the Chapter 313 agreement is the solar farm is going to increase tax revenue coming to the school district, which it should. And in reality, it does a very small amount in some cases. But what happens is, in the process of negotiation, the lawyers reduce the taxable value of the real property value of the solar farm down to this ridiculously low value that's done through a rating and a table that's been inserted in the tax code based on categories of asset values of school districts and their physical asset.
I mean, Jeff, but still, I mean, you're telling me essentially that you're explaining to me the charts to give these corporations as incentives, that's not fair to begin with to the taxpayers. I still haven't heard what due diligence is done. Can you please?
None. There's no due diligence done by the comptroller's office, the county government, or the school district. Zero.
Okay, so again, just to reiterate this point, we're talking about $1 billion contract essentially from what you're saying here, in a relatively small school district, one bad move and they're bankrupt. There's no, the solar companies coming in, this is how much this construction is going to cost. What due diligence is done to confirm those costs?
None. At this stage, none. Nobody's verifying actual cost records of construction cost, material cost, labor cost. The other big part of this cost that's not being verified or not being reported in the solar farm contract is the cost of leasing the land from the landowners. That's
okay. I want to get there in a minute, but again, I can't even get past step one. Okay, so you'll have to bear with me, brother. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Because I'm still the school is negotiating a $1 billion contract. They're gambling with the teacher's pension. They're broke. They're insolvent. I'm just trying to establish right now that a private solar company is going to behind the door meetings. And so far, I don't hear any due diligence. I mean, there could potentially be making up numbers, massive costs involved in construction. Can you at least tell me, are the agents involved in the negotiation? I'm not talking about the law firms, but the actual agents that are overseeing this, Jeff. Do you know whether or not they're qualified to negotiate these contracts, to fill out these contracts?
No, let me make sure I understand your question. Which agents are you referring to?
Any agent whatsoever at all.
In what capacity?
In favor of the taxpayer?
None. So we have no representation at the table at this time, and have not had from the beginning of these contracts. We do not have an agent representing us fairly that understands the process and understands how much money's involved and what's on the table. Nobody understands that at this time.
Okay, so these contracts are BS. I'm going to go into the risks here. I want to go into the risks, but I want to chime in on Mitch. And Mitch, anything you want to kind of clean up or summarize under kind of that subject of the front end due diligence?
Let's put it this way. This is a shell game on a massive scale, playing with other people's money, and the other people's money are the real estate tax providers, and in this particular case, the pension holders at the school district. So you've got multiple laws that have been broken here. And the truth of the matter is these conceived projects were doomed before the ink on the signature was ever dry. This is nothing but a straight up fraud, and everything that is associated with these CADs ends up in the exact same position because the people who are in charge have no ability whatsoever to determine a cost benefit analysis. And if you can't get past step one, the rest of it just flows downhill. And that's what Jeff is describing.
And Jeff, let's go into the risks. Okay, let's go into the risk of agreeing to sign up for a potential $1 billion contract. Isn't the risk, explain the risk in that they need the revenue from this project to actually pay for the debt and bonds that they issued for it. In other words, the only way that this makes sense and the only way that the school districts don't go bankrupt is that that solar project is profitable. It cash flows. Can you explain that to the viewers
So-
how that if it doesn't cash flow, what happens and the status on that?
Yeah, so let me make sure everybody understands this, because this is a very hard, you got to understand this very clearly. The money from the solar farms doesn't come from the energy generated. Let's get that clear. There's nothing about the money from the generation of electricity and sold on the grid that we're talking about. Now that money that is created, because you're selling energy, now it's taxed, and that's the sales tax. But the money coming into the school districts on the solar farms comes from the ad valorem taxation on the real property value of the solar farm. Now, I went to our judge here in Hill County 4 years ago, before they ever announced that the solar farm was coming, that there were going to be issues and challenges to these solar farm agreements. Because working in this industry and knowing how this game is played, I know the money coming from the solar farm tax revenue of ad valorem taxation is not guaranteed money. And the reason I say that is solar farms, there's risk to building a solar farm. After you build a solar farm, there's risk involved as far as it staying in operation. We have tornadoes in Texas. We have windstorms. We have hail damage. We have lightning. Lightning takes out of a lot of electrical equipment. So if that solar farm became worthless, or something happened and the solar farm company, and it was a major catastrophe, and the solar farm owner operator decided they weren't going to rebuild it or put it back in use, the value of that solar farm now is not worth what it was when they signed the agreement. Now, what happens there is tax revenue that was projected, assumed was going to come into the districts take that revenue stream and they earmark part of it, and they connect it and tie it to bond programs, future bond programs, as a source of debt payment. It may be a percentage of a bond payment, like in Itasca in 2022, they were tying 39% of the bond payment to a solar farm. That money is not guaranteed. It's not backed up by a surety bond or performance bond of any kind. So if the solar farm company went bankrupt, the solar farm went insolvent, the taxpayers and the school district are on the hook for that part of the debt of the bond they passed out, which in the state of Texas, taxpayers get to vote on bonds and have an input on bonds. But we've been left out of the equation as far as the connection of solar farm money tied to bond programs, and the risk there is huge. And nobody yet has produced a document, a surety bond from a financing institution that's backing this project for the duration of what a bond period would be, 20 years. That breaks all kinds of laws and statutes in Texas. And we have, and as taxpayers, we've been silenced.
Jeff, so you're saying that there's risk involved in investing $1 billion? Is that what I'm hearing so far?
There's always risk involved.
Who would have thunk? And you left one thing out. I know the homeowners are on the hook as well, and we are suffering out here, obviously, especially if you're on a fixed income. But is it fair to say that all the pension holders are insolvent and that the state gambled on something that they didn't have the money to? I mean, let me just rephrase this to Mitch. Mitch, how's that legal?
It's not. Want a list of laws? Because I actually wrote down a handful that are
Please.
Violation of law. Texas Penal Code 37.11, defaulting in duties as a public officer is impersonating a public official, which is a third-degree felony. We kind of laid that out in the CAD situation up in Denton Central Appraisal District. Texas Penal Code 7.01, intentionally failed to report criminal activity. What you're looking at here is a criminal conspiracy to defraud the public. It's the public's money, it's the pension holders' money, and they're all screwed in this case. There's no way out. There's a whole bunch of other stuff under the hood. Texas and U.S. Administrative Procedures Act, violated. Title 42 U.S. Code, Section 1986, knowledge of a wrongful act, and power to prevent. The players that are involved in here, like I said, everybody that touched this shell game can be held liable. They should be brought up on criminal charges, and the DA should be extraordinarily busy. You'll
Okay.
end up with a whole bunch of stuff under perjury under Title 18 U.S. Criminal Code Section 1621. You'll end up on Title 18 U.S. Code 1512, who corruptly alters, destroys, or conceals a record. Stuff going on behind closed doors, aim at that one.
And Jeff, just moving on. This is a lot. It's a lot for me to digest. Moving on, I want to talk about, okay, so we've kind of, I think, established, if anyone wants to go back and research, Chapter 313 agreements, what's going on in the Hill Country ISDs, we've laid that out. They've invested in something, a solar project. It seems like the whole investment due diligence was not there. The taxpayers were not involved. It was not successful. And now let's talk about a potential cover-up. Again, I'm just asking questions. We're asking questions. Part of a cover-up, in my eyes, would be just issuing more bonds that are already insolvent. So we'll get there, Jeff. I want you to talk about that, but I want you to talk again once more about what do you think happens behind these closed-door meetings, the negotiation between whoever's at the school district or the CADs and these actual solar corporations? What do you think happens behind the doors, Jeff? Is it math equations? Do you think that they're working on math to make sure that this is successful?
So what goes on behind the closed door session at the school board, if you were a fly on the wall, I can tell you pretty much exactly what goes on. The numbers of what they're going to negotiate has already been decided well before they ever get to that meeting. The school board members present, whoever they are, which a lot of times it's just a few of them, they might have a quorum where they can actually hold a school board, which again is a whole different issue where you don't have all the representation of the school board members there who are ignorant of the process anyway. But these guys are sitting in the chair with their fingers crossed, twiddling their thumbs, while the lawyers and the solar farm people are getting the contract documents ready and everybody's signing them. And there is no questions, there's no argument, there's nothing that helps the case of the district or the taxpayer to provide an income stream, a higher level of income stream of tax revenue that could turn around and reduce property taxes in our district, Itasca ISD, by considerable amounts. So basically, there's not much that goes on. It's probably pretty fast meeting, and the documents are signed, and the lawyers get their money, the consultants get their money, and everybody goes their merry way, and we are holding the bag.
Okay. Now, I want you to make sure that I'm saying this correctly, and then I want to get Mitch's opinion on this, but there's also times where they bring in legal consultants. They may not even know if they're the proper legal consultants, but they bring in legal consultants to potentially negotiate the terms on behalf of what I would think would be the taxpayer. But correct me if I'm wrong, here, but that legal representation to negotiate against the corporations, our legal representation to fight for us, that's actually those solar companies' legal representation. The solar companies are paying for those lawyers. Is that what you're saying, Jeff?
Yeah. So
Okay.
the school district, the ISDs, issue checks to pay the legal counsel and the consultants that they've hired to negotiate the contract. They pay them substantial amounts of money. The contracts are signed and executed and they're done. And then the solar farm companies have turned around and reimbursed the school district for those legal fees.
Mitch, my comprehension of I'm not accusing anyone of anything, just trying to ask some questions. Mitch, can you explain how that's not money laundering and that's not racketeering?
It ends up being racketeering depending on what the final results are. But the more important thing is that the attorneys are in fact an officer of the court. As an officer of the court, they have a duty to report anything that is a suspected criminal law or criminal violation of law. And therefore they defaulted in their duty. And that fact in and of itself means that the attorneys have committed a third degree felony. There's problems up the yin yang on this story. This is bad, and everybody that's touched it refused to even look at what their own responsibility was and just simply got their money, their pockets stuffed with money because they got paid to do allegedly what they said was a job. But the truth of the matter is, in order to get that money into their pocket, they stole taxpayer money. And that's what you are. So the attorneys have a problem here.
And part of that stealing the taxpayers' money is these unfair tax incentives that these corporations get. Is that right, Jeff? Did you uncover special homestead, special tax breaks that these solar farms are getting? And again, remember the premise of the 313 agreement, bringing jobs, revenue, service. I don't know many jobs that are created from a failing solar farm. Maybe I just don't understand the math. But can you explain the corporate tax incentives that they get and normal homeowners do not?
Yeah. So let me say one thing before I forget this and we lose this. You talk about job creation. So part of a Chapter 313 agreement is to create jobs. In every one of the contracts so far, we've reviewed, and we've only reviewed just a small portion of what's in Hill County, Bosque County, McLennan, and Ellis County in our area here in North Central Texas. Job creation is non-existent, basically. They forfeited and agreed to not hold the solar farms accountable to creating jobs on several of these solar farms. And they agreed to it. When the part of the premise of 313 agreements is to create jobs, they waived that requirement per the 313 agreement. So that's an obvious violation of the reason and purpose of 313 agreements in the beginning. Now, corporate tax relief for corporations, abatements, and to make everybody understand this listening to this channel, just use the word homestead in place of abatement. And it's basically what it's equivalent to. You get a big homestead exemption if you're a solar farm. And in that spreadsheet I sent you with the contracts that we've already looked at, those abatements range from, some of the bigger ones are from 85% to like 94.5% abatements, which allows the solar farm not to pay taxes on hundreds of millions of dollars of real property value, not, unfairly. It's, Mitch has pointed out in his cases and things he's bringing out, uniformity doesn't exist. There's no fair uniformity to the whole system.
Well, Jeff, isn't there? Well, I would disagree. From my 1 week of working on this, I would say there's absolutely something that is 100% uniform, which is the fraud and corruption.
Exactly.
That's been 100. So far, everything all adds up to there's a lack of math. The taxpayer's at risk. We can't afford to live, brother. The fraud has exceeded the revenue. How is the fraud exceeding the revenue? That's impossible. Well, I don't understand. But I'm sorry. That's my rant. I want to go back to the viewers. You spent time on this, and the reason I want to go back to this, brother, I think this is so important. This extends well outside of the school district. So the fraud is uniform. It extends well outside of Texas. And you've labeled here, Jeff, several school districts. Right here, it's on the screen, multiple school districts, multiple solar projects that have failed. And you've outlined, as a result of these tax incentives, and as a result of these unfair homesteads, they're missing out on a potential, the taxpayer, we're missing out on $7.6 million in tax revenue. You're essentially saying this is lost, and this is the point I'm trying to make. This is lost from simple upfront due diligence. If there was simple upfront due diligence, this small section here alone would have generated an additional $7.6 million. Am I missing anything there, brother?
Yes. So let me clarify something. The solar farms haven't failed, Travis. The solar farms are in place and they are still under construction. What's
they're not even generating revenue?
The very first one I'm trying to get information from ERCOT to prove that it's actually generated energy into the grid. Now it has been taxed. The Hill County Appraisal District received the first tax payment in 2024. We believe that the solar farm is actually online. We don't know what percent of its capacity is actually generated, but the solar farms are still under construction. What's going on here? The revenue loss that's realized is because the school districts did not know how to represent themselves and taxpayers to increase the minimum taxable liability of the solar farm to some level that's fair. Now, in the spreadsheet, you saw the yellow side versus the gray side. So in simple math, to make it simple for people, let's just say you argued at the table and you were pretty good at negotiating. The lawyers were working on your side and you gave them a 50% tax abatement or homestead. That is the difference in those two numbers I'm showing you. What was really negotiated in the gray versus what's negotiated in what could have been negotiated in the yellow. Very simply, could it result in that additional tax revenue? Now, I talked to you about this earlier, and I think I talked to Mitch about this before last night when we spoke. The solar farm companies were going to build the solar farms in Hill County, regardless if there was ever a Chapter 313 system in the state of Texas. The solar farms build the solar farms in the locations they do based on criteria that nobody in the state of Texas understands. At the court level, at the state comptroller's level, there are major pieces of that puzzle they don't have any understanding of why the solar farms are where they're located. So tax abatements, if you nullified all the tax abatements in these contracts today, the school districts are going to receive a lot of tax money, and the solar farms are still going to be there.
Oh my God! I mean, they are, because the solar farms got the money, but not only just the money, they got the quote unquote, homestead. But I want to. This is insane, and that's why I say these solar companies. I mean, they have predestined numbers and lots, and like take it or leave it. We're gonna put the risk on the teachers, the homeowners. And that's why I say they're predators looking for school districts that are stupid when it comes to negotiating these complicated contracts. And so I want to ask Mitch this, Jeff. Mitch, how widespread is this, man? I mean, is this just this handful of school districts? Are these types of solar schemes going on around the nation? How widespread do you think this is?
Past Canada. So in Canada, you have windmill farms that, as we speak, are literally being torn down. The key word here is subsidies. So what Jeff has uncovered is a backwards way of creating a subsidy. So the developers, in this case of the solar farm, needed the good faith credit of the real estate taxpayers. So this is a backdoor way to obtain that good faith credit of the real estate taxpayers. The problem was, just like a subsidy that's gone on in the solar industry in Canada and the windmill farms in Canada and the windmill farms up north of us, the reality is that the governments were writing checks up to 86 cents per kilowatt hour. In other words, the math never worked from day one. It is a shell game, just like I said.
And Mitch, do you think this is creating jobs, or do you think it's putting people at risk of losing their job?
So let me ask you this. How many people does it take to wipe down a solar panel if it gets stuck? The answer is no.
Zero?
Yeah. That's the reality. No, it's nothing but a shell game. It's a straight up lie. The developers were smart because there's no nexus between the revenue stream that's supposed to come back to the school district. It's not papered, right? So the reality of it is they got the credit that they wanted. The project's got alleged funding to get it finished. And then the school districts will get nothing except they got the bill. So what happens when this thing defaults, they hold their hand out again back to the taxpayers, give us more money. As we've discovered, there's 37% of the homeowners right now today that are going to lose their home and or file bankruptcy because they can't afford the roof that's over their head. So where is this money going to come from to keep supplying the permanent debt that these idiots keep creating? And that's where we are. I mean, in truth, the school district where Jeff is should be put into involuntary bankruptcy effective immediately, because the more delays there are in this, the higher the debt load. That interest clock isn't stopping. The problems associated with these contracts isn't stopping. At a minimum, that school district should be put into Chapter 9. At a minimum.
Mitch, can you tie this all together now and talk about how essentially this, and choice words here, I got to be careful, systemic, cumulative fraud and corruption is going to essentially lead to half of the country and the agencies within those countries to become bankrupt, and how honestly, perhaps the Chevron doctrine allowed it. Can you just touch on that? And then I want to get Jeff's final thoughts.
Well, Chevron doctrine, which I'm extremely familiar with, it's called Chevron deference, was all about government overreach. And it was killed off by the U.S. Supreme Court about 30 days ago. And what you're seeing here in Texas, and it's not just Texas. I mean, this is a problem. It's gotten out of hand. They actually have weaponized what it is that they're doing by ignoring the law. They all say they adhere to it, but the evidence is the exact opposite. When you look at our website, you'll see all the evidence. Well, how can that evidence exist but for intent to commit crime? And that's where you are. So the amount of what you're seeing here, this is just another layer of the exact same problem.
Sounds like a greater depression is going to happen. Jeff,
It has to happen in order to wipe out the debt. The debt cannot be paid back. These pensioners that invested the money into these mortgages, they'll be lucky to see 13 cents on the dollar. I mean, there's nothing here. There's no assets. If you went to buy a solar farm, what would you pay for if you didn't know what the cash flow was?
Sounds like there's one.
What would you pay for it if you knew what the debt load under the hood was?
Nothing. I would walk away. I mean, it sounds like the only asset here is 3 letters. ISD.
Yeah.
So here you go. You could say that you're back in the IS. I mean, what? What is this, man? I mean, this is I've known you for 7 days, Mitch. Jeff, I want to end on you, man, for the sake of time here. I know I did a horrible job condensing 18 years of your life. I know this is the tip of the iceberg. I really wanted to hone in on the pensions, the bonds, the fact that there's no collateral here. Everything seems like it's fraud, corruption, overreach at its finest. Jeff, how can we end in hope? What would you like to see come from this video? That you or not even just this video, come of your 18 years of hard work? What would you like to see come of that?
Well, I'd like to see a lot of people locked up that need to be locked up, that have turned their heads and sacrificed us as taxpayers to the almighty dollar in fraud and corruption. I mean, but first of all, and Mitch has said this numerous times, and I appreciate his being very upfront and solid on what he's stating. You can't repay the debt. We're beyond this. The government, the state of Texas, and our leaders in Austin, Texas, have been hoodwinked, like they have been for decades and just about everything, that the idea of the Chapter 313 agreements was going to help bring in additional income to school districts, and at the same time do that could reduce the tax burden on property owners, homeowners in the district by lowering the ad valorem taxation on personal property. That did not happen, cannot happen, and will not happen as long as we have incompetent, crooked people who want their pockets lined and won't do their job and believe they're above the law. So taxpayers, the regular Joe Blow citizen, needs to get off of his lazy boy chair and get motivated and get involved. Otherwise, nothing's ever going to change. I mean, other than what Mitch is doing and I'm trying to do, in 18 years, I can't get anybody's attention for 3 minutes about this, but yet they cry and moan and groan when they get their tax statement in. Well, my taxes are going up and I'm going to lose my house. Well, you were part of the problem because you're not paying attention. You're not holding people accountable. You're not asking the questions that need to be asked. And let me ask you, Travis, so you're down by Houston.
Yes, sir.
You want one of the biggest fraudulent, in your face fraud and corruption schemes launched in Texas? It's the Houston School ISD $4.4 billion bond program. That is corruption in plain sight. I can tear that thing apart and tell you so many problems with that. People just can't even imagine. But nobody asked the question what you're getting for the money. They're not breaking it down. School board members, and the average school board member probably can't get his mind around $100,000 cost of anything, much less hundreds of millions or billions dollars of contract. They are clueless. We are not represented, and we got to get these people off the school boards, or there has to be, and this is, and we haven't even talked about this part. All of my work and all the effort I have is in conjunction with a huge other effort of reforming school funding. We have to go to a fee-based education system in the state of Texas. You have to get taxpayers off the hook. You have to fund education, get rid of property taxes, unfair, unlawful, unconstitutional property taxes. And we have to educate kids based on a fee-based schedule that you can tie real value and real results of education to dollars by writing a check every year to send your kid to school. The parent writes a check, and get rid of these huge, huge entities like CADs and the layers of government we're paying for that we receive no benefit from.
I mean, Jeff, it sounds like I'm already writing a check. And, actually I do, that's one of the biggest costs in my own household is my children's education. I don't do public school, but I pay for it with my taxes. And guys, here's the thing, we'll wrap it up, man. I know we've been talking a little bit longer, but you guys, to the viewers, some tough love from Jeff. Sign the petition, obviously. And if you guys are out there investing in real estate, you guys know that we wish you luck. And Jeff, Mitch, thank you for your time, gentlemen.